It always starts with a look, not a glance, not an expression of affection, but a subtle, silent scan. She doesn't just see you, she sizes you up. Not consciously, not with malice, but with the deep, ancient eyes of the unconscious feminine, the anima, as Jung described it, searching for something buried beneath your skin, strength, depth, mystery, something that can match the chaos within her own soul. And if you're not aware of what's happening, if you've never looked into your own psychological shadows, you will mistake this for love. You'll think you're being chosen, that you're special, but the truth is darker, more complex. You're being tested by forces neither of you fully understand. See, desire isn't what you've been taught. It's not sweet, it's not polite, it's not even conscious. Real desire, especially in the feminine psyche, is a storm of contradictions, a chaotic dance between light and shadow, nurturance and destruction, connection and obliteration. And if you don't know how to stand in that storm without collapsing, or worse, without pretending to be something you're not, you'll get devoured. Not by her, but by your own unconscious. Carl Jung wrote extensively about projection, about how the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge get cast onto others like shadows on a wall. But what he also uncovered, and what most men never hear, is that the feminine shadow is not some passive, dormant force. It is active, instinctual, testing. When a woman is not fully conscious of her own animus, the inner masculine image within her psyche, she projects it onto men, and suddenly, you're no longer yourself, you're a role, a fantasy, a vessel for her internal myth. And the moment you stop playing the part, you're not met with calm disappointment. You're met with fury, coldness, or worse, disinterest. You didn't fail her, you just failed the script. And in a world where most men are trained to win affection through performance, this collapse feels like annihilation. But here's the brutal truth. If you don't face this dynamic, it will rule every relationship you have. You'll keep trying to be enough, never realizing that the game you're playing isn't about love at all. It's about unconscious power. Let's go deeper. Desire that comes from the conscious mind says, I want someone kind, stable, supportive. But desire that comes from the unconscious, the shadow, whispers something entirely different. It's drawn to edge, to danger, to the forbidden. It tests, it provokes, it demands presence so intense it borders on confrontation. And this is where most men misunderstand the emotional language of women. You think she's mad at you for something logical, that if you just explain yourself, fix the problem, be nicer, things will go back to normal. But that's not what she's responding to. She's not looking for words, she's looking for energy, depth, self-possession, the kind of grounded masculine presence that doesn't flinch when the storm arrives. And if you can't provide that, not because you're bad, but because you haven't done your own inner work, she'll start to poke, prod, and that's not cruelty. That's the shadow at work. She wants to feel your edge, not because she wants to fight you, but because she wants to feel if you can hold her without crumbling. Her tests aren't conscious. She may not even know she's doing it, but her psyche does, and if yours isn't strong enough to meet her, she will eventually lose respect. This is why some women seem drawn to men who are unavailable, cold, or even toxic, not because they consciously want to suffer, but because those men embody traits their own animus has distorted. They represent danger, rebellion, mystery, all the things the conscious mind says no to, but the shadow says more. And here's the paradox. The man who tries too hard to be good, to be agreeable, to be emotionally available all the time, becomes predictable. And what is predictable becomes invisible. But if you're still hearing this as an instruction to play hard to get or to manipulate her, you've missed the point entirely. This isn't about pretending, it's about presence. You become unshakable not by performing shadows, by facing your own unconscious fantasies, repressed aggression, your fear of rejection, your obsession with being chosen. Only then can you stop reacting to her tests. Only then Can you stop seeing her behavior as an attack and start recognizing it for what it is? A call to depth. Because what the unconscious feminine truly desires isn't dominance or submission, it's mutual awakening, a meeting of equals in the underworld, and that only happens when both people have faced the truth of their own darkness. The shadow isn't evil, it's powerful, repressed emotion, untouched passion. It's the part of you that knows who you are, even when you're pretending to be someone else. Jung taught that individuation, the journey to wholeness, requires that we integrate this part of ourselves. That we stop trying to be nice and instead become real. You'll know you're doing this work when you stop chasing love and start radiating presence. When you stop trying to be understood and start understanding yourself. When her tests no longer destabilize you but clarify you, you begin to see what's underneath the surface, that her emotions, her criticisms, her confusion, they're not about you. They're echoes from her own unconscious. And when you don't react, when you stay grounded, aware and honest, you create a space for something sacred, not manipulation, not control, alchemy. Because here's what Jung ultimately taught us. The unconscious is not a weakness, it is a source of raw potential, but only for those brave enough to face it. The masculine psyche has been conditioned for centuries to believe that power lies in control, in knowing what to say, in fixing, in leading. But when you enter the realm of the unconscious feminine, none of those tools work. This is not a place where logic wins. This is not a boardroom, a battlefield, or a debate. It's a mirror maze, one that reflects every hidden part of you back at 10 times its size. And this is where most men panic. You start strong, trying to lead with clarity and reason, but then comes the curveball, the sudden withdrawal, the contradiction between her words and her actions. She says she wants honesty, but punishes you when you tell the truth. She says she craves safety, but pulls toward chaos. You think she's being irrational. You think she's testing you for no reason. And you're right, except the reason isn't hers, it's yours. Her reactions are touching something deeper than the situation. They're activating parts of your own psyche that you've refused to face. Your need for approval, your fear of inadequacy, your childhood wound that still whispers, you're only lovable if you earn it. That's why it hurts so much. That's why it feels personal. But this is the exact moment Jung called the threshold of transformation, because when you stop trying to win, when you stop trying to fix her and instead ask yourself, what in me is being awakened right now, you begin to take your power back. Not power over her, power over yourself. Now here's what few are willing to admit. Not every woman is ready for this kind of man. Not every woman has faced her animus. Not every woman is even aware that her attraction patterns are driven by shadows she's never explored. So when you show up with clarity, with integrity, with grounded presence, she may not know what to do with you. You won't play into her fantasy. You won't perform her script. You won't get reactive when she withdraws or explodes or criticizes you without reason. Instead, you'll remain bakar, not cold, not distant, but conscious. And this, ironically, will disturb her more than anything, because she's used to men being either passive or dominant, obedient or controlling. She's not used to a man who sees her, who sees through the projection, through the persona, and straight into the storm underneath. That kind of gaze disarms, it dismantles, it calls her into awareness whether she's ready or not. And that's the most dangerous kind of presence there is, the kind that doesn't beg, doesn't force, just is. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of psychological wholeness. Not the sanitized version of masculinity you were taught, not the obedient nice guy or the aggressive alpha archetype, but the integrated man, the one who has made peace with his own darkness, who doesn't fear female desire because he's already faced the chaos within himself. Think about this. Most of the pain you've experienced in relationships wasn't about rejection. It was about confusion, the confusion of not understanding the game you were being pulled into. the confusion of hearing one thing and feeling another, the confusion of trying to respond to conscious signals while being attacked by unconscious forces. That confusion ends the moment you stop interpreting her behavior through logic and start reading it through the symbolic language of the psyche. When she withdraws without reason, you don't chase, you observe. When she tests you with contradiction, you don't collapse, you get curious. When she projects her pain onto you, you don't defend, you remain centered, holding your ground but with empathy. Because now you know it's not about you. It's about the dance of the unconscious. And the only way to survive that dance is not to dominate it, not to avoid it, but to learn its rhythm. This is where your work begins. Shadow integration isn't just about understanding women. It's about understanding yourself, the parts of you that chase, that fear being left, that crave being chosen, because deep down you've never chosen yourself. Jung's model of the psyche tells us that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. And nowhere is this more true than in love. Every woman who rejected you, every partner who pulled away the moment you softened, every relationship that started with passion and ended with resentment, they weren't just accidents, they were mirrors, each one revealing a part of your psyche that had not yet been owned. That's why this video isn't about understanding women. It's about understanding the archetypal patterns that play out beneath the surface of all relationships. The anima, the shadow, the persona, the inner child, the unconscious masculine and the unintegrated feminine. These are not metaphors, they are blueprints. Blueprints that determine how you show up in love, in sex, in intimacy. And if you don't understand them, you'll keep attracting partners who trigger your wounds until you either break or awaken. So let me ask you directly, are you still trying to be liked? Still trying to be chosen? Still trying to mold yourself into the fantasy of the ideal man you think she wants? Because if you are, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance, and the audience will always leave when the show gets too predictable. But the moment you drop the act, the moment you stop negotiating for love, the moment you stand grounded in your truth, even when it costs you connection, you become magnetic. Not because you're playing a role, but because you're real. Let's make one thing clear. This isn't about becoming indifferent. This isn't about emotional withdrawal or playing psychological chess to win relationships. That's just another mask, another persona, another layer of armor that separates you from truth. This is about becoming so deeply grounded in your own being that you can stand in front of the storm of feminine desire, its contradictions, its tests, its mysteries, and not flinch. Not because you're numb, but because you're whole. Jung called this the path of individuation, the process of becoming a complete psychological being, one who has acknowledged and integrated all parts of the self, the light, the dark, the known and the repressed. And here's the hard truth. You can't complete this journey through thought alone. You can't read your way into integration. You have to live it. You have to feel the humiliation of being misunderstood, the burn of abandonment, the sting of realizing that the woman who said she loved you was only ever in love with the idea of you. And then you have to ask, why did that hurt so much? What wound did it touch? Because that pain, that's the doorway. Until you walk through that doorway, you'll remain at the mercy of others' projections and your own. You will keep attracting women who represent what you have not yet faced in yourself. The ones who pull you in with mystery but punish your vulnerability. The ones who flirt with your dreams but feed on your insecurities. The ones who say they want depth but run the moment you stop performing. You think they broke your heart, but really they just shattered the illusion you were still clinging to. So let's go back to the feminine desire for a moment. At its root, it is not evil, it is not manipulative, it is not cruel. It is primal, sacred, ancient. It is the archetypal fire that burns away falseness. It's not looking for perfection, it's looking for presence. Not the kind you read about in self-help books, but the kind that arises when a man has descended into his own darkness and made peace with it. Can you remain grounded when you are misunderstood? Can you stay calm when you're being criticized unfairly? Can you say no to affection that feels false, even if it means being alone? Because until you can, you will keep bending, compromising, appeasing, trading your authenticity for temporary approval. You'll think you're being loving, but what you're really doing is abandoning yourself. Jung was relentless in this truth. The man who sacrifices his soul for love will never find peace. He will only find resentment, and resentment over time will turn him either bitter or hollow. You've seen it. Maybe you've even lived it. The man who once gave everything becomes emotionally numb. He smiles, nods, plays the role, but inside, he's gone. Ghosted from his own life. That is the real danger of ignoring shadow work. It's not that you become evil, it's that you become empty. Because when you disown your darkness, you also disown your vitality, your fire, your erotic power, your boundaries, your voice. You become nice. And in doing so, you make yourself invisible to the very woman you're trying to attract. And here's where things get painfully ironic. The moment you decide to show up honestly, to say what you feel without shame, to walk away when you're being disrespected, to stand firm even when it costs you approval, everything starts to shift. Women start responding to you differently. Some will be repelled. They'll say you're arrogant, that you've changed, that you're too intense. Others will be intrigued. They'll feel something they can't explain, a kind of psychological gravity that pulls them in, not because you're playing a game, but because you're standing in your truth. This isn't mystery as manipulation, this is mystery as integrity. Because when you've integrated your own unconscious, you no longer explain yourself to be liked. You no longer dilute your essence to fit someone else's expectations. You no longer fear the withdrawal of affection because you've stopped needing it to feel whole. And here's the thing, women feel this. They don't always understand it consciously, but they feel it. In your tone, in your silence, in the steadiness of your gaze. In the refusal to be rushed, pushed, or shamed into pleasing. And this is where you begin to understand the deeper truth. The feminine isn't trying to destroy you, she's trying to test you for congruence. She wants to feel that who you say you are matches who you actually are, that your words carry weight, that your boundaries are real, that your yes means yes, and your no, no. Because only then can she relax. Only then can she surrender the control she never wanted to carry in the first place. But make no mistake, if she senses you're faking it, if you're using confidence as a mask for your unresolved wounds, if you're performing groundedness while secretly still chasing validation, she'll know. She won't know how she knows, but she will feel the falseness. That's the thing about unconscious dynamics. They bypass the rational mind. They go straight to the body, the gut, the instinct. That's where desire lives. And if you don't have access to your own instincts, your own body, your own primal knowing, you will never connect with hers. You will always remain in your head, trying to decode her words while missing the real message screaming silently beneath them. Are you real? Are you here? Can I trust you? This is the question beneath every test. Every contradiction, every emotional outburst, every withdrawal, and the answer is not in your mouth, it's in your spine. So ask yourself, can you hold your ground in the storm? Not resist it, not attack it, just hold. That's what the integrated masculine does, not because he's superior, not because he's dominant, but because he's whole. Because he knows that feminine desire is not a puzzle to be solved, it's a fire to be met. Not with fear, not with fantasy, but with presence. But presence isn't just standing still, it's not rigid, it's not robotic calm. True presence is alive, aware, responsive without being reactive. It listens with the body, not just the ears. It senses the shifts in energy, the unspoken fears behind her rage, the unmet longing behind her coldness. And that's what makes it so rare. Most men, when tested by the feminine, either collapse or retaliate. They interpret her intensity as irrationality, her emotions as problems to solve, and the moment you do that, you lose the thread, because what she's really trying to feel is whether you can hold space for the full range of who she is, not manage her, not fix her, just hold. And you cannot do that if you haven't learned to hold your own chaos first. This is why your own inner work isn't optional, it's foundational. You have to face the parts of you that want to control, the part that panics when she pulls away, the part that craves being the good guy, even at the cost of your truth. Because until you do, you will be reactive. You will take things personally. You will either overgive or shut down, and she will feel that fragility, and she will lose trust. Not because she's cruel, but because her unconscious is constantly scanning for congruence, for solidity, for masculine clarity that isn't born from bravado but from truth. You have to ask yourself, have you met your own shadow? Not read about it, not intellectualized it, met it. Have you sat with your need for approval until it screamed? Have you stared into your own rage without running? Have you admitted the parts of you that want to be worshipped, obeyed, adored? Not to act on them, but to own them. Because when you disown these parts, they don't disappear. They just show up in your relationships as manipulation, passive aggression, shame, or overcompensation. They show up in how you chase, how you explain, how you withhold, how you perform. Jung knew this well, that the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at become the very forces that control us. And nowhere does this play out more clearly than in intimate relationships. Because intimacy is where the masks fall. It's where your unconscious patterns reveal themselves. It's where you stop performing and start projecting. You think you're responding to her, but really you're reacting to the unhealed mother, the critical father, the betrayal that still lives in your nervous system. And she's doing the same. That's why it feels so intense, so overwhelming. Because you're not just two people having a conversation. Your two unconscious histories clashing in the present. But here's the sacred opportunity, if you're willing to take it. Every time she tests you, every time she pushes, withdraws, provokes, she's inviting you into deeper integration. She's not saying, fix me. She's asking, can you stay? Can you stay with yourself in the discomfort? Can you stay with her without collapsing? Can you stay true without needing to be right? Because that's where transformation happens, not in avoiding conflict, not in having the perfect response, but in remaining conscious when everything in you wants to disappear. This is what makes you magnetic. Not muscles, not money, not mimicry of masculine cliches, but consciousness under pressure, awareness in the fire. That's what the feminine responds to. That's what she trusts. Because when you are fully present, fully integrated, fully alive, you become a mirror. And not everyone wants to see their reflection. This is why some women will walk away, why some will rage against you, why some will say you're too much or too serious or too intense. But that's not your burden to carry. Because once you've met yourself, really met yourself, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop trying to be digestible, you stop trying to be just right. You start choosing. And that changes everything, because now you're no longer at the mercy of who chooses you. You're no longer auditioning. You're no longer playing roles to gain access to affection. You're standing in your center. And from that place, you attract differently. You attract women who've done their own work, who don't run from presence, who don't need you to be their savior, their surrogate father, or their fantasy fulfillment. Women who want partnership, not performance, and you'll know the difference instantly. There's no chaos, no panic, no manipulation. Just resonance, depth, peace, because when two integrated beings meet, it's not a war, it's a homecoming. But here's the final challenge. Even when you do this work, even when you've faced your shadow, integrated your animus, awakened your instincts, You will still feel moments of fear, doubt, longing. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're alive, because the goal was never to become untouchable. The goal was to become real. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But once you do, once you stop rejecting your darkness, your desire, your wounds, you become someone the world cannot categorize. You're no longer a puppet of your past or a prisoner of your projections. You are a man who sees, and in a world full of illusions, that makes you dangerous. You become dangerous not because you dominate, not because you manipulate, but because you no longer seek permission to exist. You no longer shrink when you're not understood. You no longer twist yourself into a shape that fits someone else's idea of a good man. And most importantly, you no longer betray yourself to be chosen, because now you've chosen yourself. And that is the rarest kind of power. So what happens when you meet a woman who is still ruled by her unconscious animus, who projects her inner masculine fantasy onto you, expecting you to be her savior, her villain, her emotional crutch? You'll see it instantly, not with judgment, but with clarity. You'll recognize the pull, the temptation to prove yourself, the old urge to become whatever she wants you to be, just to feel loved. But instead of falling into the role, you'll pause. You'll feel the sensation in your body, the heat in your chest, the fear in your gut. You'll breathe, you'll stay, and you'll choose truth, because you're not here to fulfill someone else's fantasy. You're here to live in reality. And if reality is too much for her, if your wholeness triggers her unresolved wounds, if your depth becomes too uncomfortable for someone used to games, then she will leave, and you will let her, not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with reverence. For the path you've chosen, this is the paradox of deep masculine presence. It attracts everything, but it doesn't chase anything, because its power doesn't lie in pursuit, it lies in being consistent, being honest, being awake. And that alone dismantles illusion. Now let's talk about projection, because it's the heart of this entire conversation. Jung warned that the greatest danger in love isn't rejection, it's projection. The moment you fall in love with someone, you're not just loving them, you're loving your unconscious image of them. And the moment she falls in love with you, she's doing the same. That's not romance, that's fantasy. She sees your confidence and thinks security. She sees your silence and thinks wisdom. She sees your calm and thinks unshakable. But what she's really seeing is her inner masculine, her animus. And when your real human self eventually shows up, messy, flawed, evolving, she may feel betrayed, even if you never promised anything. Because she wasn't in love with you, she was in love with what you represented. And this is where most men get confused, angry, heartbroken. You think, I did everything right. I was honest. I was present. Why did she pull away? Because she wasn't ready for a man. She was ready for a fantasy. And when the fantasy didn't hold, she didn't stay. But that's not your failure. That's her unfinished work. And the only way to respond is not by becoming colder or harder or more alpha. It's by becoming even more yourself. Because the moment you abandon your truth to keep someone, you lose yourself. And no woman, no matter how beautiful, mysterious, or enchanting, is worth the price of your own soul. You have to remember, desire is not the same as love. She may desire your strength, your depth, your mystery, but if she hasn't met her own shadow, if she hasn't faced her inner tyrant, her savior complex, her unintegrated animus, she won't know how to love you. Not really. She'll crave what you bring, but resent what you represent. And eventually she'll try to reshape you into something safer, more predictable, more obedient. She'll ask you to soften, to explain, to become more understanding. And here's where most men fold. You think being understanding is love. You think compromising is love. You think being needed is love. But it's not. Love isn't a performance. Love is what remains when both of you have taken off the mask and stayed. So the next time you find yourself in the pull of a woman's desire, stop and ask, is this real? Or is this a projection? Does she love me for who I am, or for what I represent to her unconscious? And more importantly, am I doing the same? Because you can't ask her to love your truth if you're not living it. You can't demand depth if you're still hiding behind a curated image. You can't expect to be seen if you haven't seen yourself. This is the soul of Jungian work. You meet the unconscious not just to understand others, but to become whole, to stop being ruled by the hidden forces that sabotage intimacy and connection. Because the truth is, it's not her tests that are the problem, it's your unreadiness for them. Once you've integrated your shadow, you no longer react, you respond. You no longer explain, you embody. You no longer seek to be loved, you become love itself, fierce, unapologetic, honest, and yes, sometimes alone. But that solitude is not a punishment, it's a purification. It's where the old patterns die, it's where the fantasy burns, it's where your authentic masculine finally wakes up, and when it does, something incredible happens. You stop attracting chaos, you stop falling for projection, you stop chasing emotional storms disguised as passion, you start drawing in women who have met their own pain, who aren't afraid of yours, women who've done the work. And the relationship that emerges from that space, it's not perfect, it's real. A real relationship doesn't always feel like fireworks, it feels like safety in truth. Like being able to breathe without shrinking. Like sharing silence without fear of abandonment. And yet, it still challenges you. Because real intimacy will always bring up your edges. It will expose where you haven't healed. It will mirror the parts you still haven't owned. But the difference is this. When you're with someone who's done their shadow work, they won't run when your darkness appears. They won't shame your wounds. They won't project their pain onto your presence. They'll stand with you, not because they need you, but because they choose you. And isn't that what you've always wanted? Not to be needed, not to be chased, only to be seen and chosen in your wholeness. This is the medicine of the integrated feminine. She doesn't want you to pretend. She doesn't need you to perform. She only asks that you show up in your fullness, with your strength, your fear, your history, your truth. But until she becomes conscious of her own unconscious, she'll keep reaching for men who play a role. And if you're not conscious, you'll become that role without even realizing it. That's why this work is essential. Because every time you abandon yourself to be enough, you reinforce the lie that you're not already whole. And that lie will poison every connection you try to build. It will turn desire into dependency. It will turn vulnerability into manipulation. It will turn love into performance. And that's not love. That's survival. Jung called this the trap of the persona, the mask we wear to be liked, accepted, chosen. And he warned that the longer we wear that mask, the more we forget who we really are underneath it. So ask yourself now, with brutal honesty, what mask have you been wearing? Have you been the pleaser, the protector, the stoic one, the emotionally available nice guy? These masks aren't random. They're your psyche's way of trying to earn love by becoming useful, predictable, safe. But love earned through performance is never secure. Because deep down, you'll always be afraid that if the mask slips, they'll leave. And maybe that's already happened. Maybe you've been left, ghosted, discarded, not for something you did wrong, but because you dared to be real. You dared to stop performing, you dared to say, this is me, all of me, and she couldn't hold that. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility now, not to shrink back into the mask, but to stay true to the self that emerged when it was most painful to be seen, because that is your path to freedom, not control, not charm, not compliance, but truth. Radical, unapologetic, embodied truth. And when you live from that place, the entire dynamic of desire You're no longer subject to the whims of the feminine unconscious. You're no longer caught in the cycle of testing, failing, and performing. You are centered, present, unshakable. You stop asking, what does she want, and start asking, is this aligned with who I truly am? And that is a revolutionary question, because it places the locus of your worth back inside of you. It reclaims the power you've been outsourcing to women who never truly saw you. It restores the dignity that was eroded by chasing what could never be caught: approval, admiration, fantasy love, and in its place it plants something deeper: self-possession, that sacred quality of a man who knows who he is, what he values, what he will give, and what he will never trade again. From this place, you don't reject the feminine, you honor it, but you stop letting it define you. You stop making it your compass. You stop bending to emotional weather patterns that were never about you to begin with. You learn to stand not as a wall, but as a rooted tree, unmoved by every gust of wind, firm but alive, open but clear, accessible but not desperate. And that changes everything. Because now you're no longer asking her to validate your identity. You're inviting her to join you in a space of mutual truth. No roles, no masks, no projections, just two sovereign beings choosing each other, not to fill a void, but to mirror wholeness. And if she can't meet you there, you let her go, with love, with respect, but without compromise, because your wholeness is not up for negotiation anymore. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for most men, that becoming doesn't begin until the illusion of love has collapsed, until the chase has failed, until the mirror shatters and the mask falls off, and what's left is raw, sacred truth. This is the real initiation. Not through sex, not through validation, but through solitude, through silence, through the death of the fantasy self. Only then can the real you be born. The man who no longer begs to be seen because he sees himself. The man who no longer waits to be chosen because he has chosen truth. The man who no longer fears the tests because he knows they're not about him. He is not performing. He is not pleasing. He is not pretending. He is being. And that being is what the unconscious feminine truly longs for. Not your perfection, not your usefulness, but your presence, the kind that doesn't change when the weather does, the kind that doesn't collapse when love is withdrawn, the kind that remains true even when no one is watching. This is not a path for the faint-hearted, but it's the only path that leads to love that doesn't betray. So now, here you are, standing at the edge of something deeper than what most men are ever taught to see. This isn't just about understanding women. It's not about decoding behavior, mastering techniques, or learning what to say to get a better response. That's surface level, tactical. It may get you short-term results, but it won't change the core of how you relate, not just to others, but to yourself. Because underneath all of it, the rejections, the testing, the projection, the craving to be enough, there's one truth you can no longer ignore. You have to stop chasing love. That requires you to abandon yourself. This isn't just a decision, it's a death. A death of the boy who needed to be picked to feel worthy. A death of the performer who thought love was earned by being what someone else needed. A death of the part of you that confused emotional chaos with passion, and in that death something far more powerful is born. A man who doesn't need to be validated because he's integrated. A man who doesn't flinch when the feminine storms because he has met the storms within himself. A man who doesn't make her desire his compass, but his own truth his foundation, because now you understand. The unconscious feminine isn't testing you to destroy you. She's testing to see if your center holds, to see if you disappear under pressure, to see if you're real or another fantasy wearing the mask of masculinity. When you pass that test, it's not because you said the right thing, it's because you didn't leave yourself. You stood firm. You stayed kind without being submissive. You stayed clear without needing to overpower. You stayed rooted, not because you wanted to win, but because you refused to betray your own soul again. You start to see how all the old patterns begin to lose their power. You're no longer triggered by withdrawal because you've faced abandonment and no longer fear it. You're no longer anxious in the presence of intensity because your own inner fire no longer scares you. You're no longer destabilized by her moods because your emotions are no longer enemies to escape. They're signals you've learned to respect. And maybe for the first time, you see the game for what it is. Not a test you have to pass to earn love, but an initiation into deeper truth. The deeper you go into yourself, the more your entire energetic field shifts. You stop pulling, you stop chasing. You stop explaining. The women who used to control the dynamic with hot and cold energy suddenly feel exposed because you're not playing anymore. You've stepped out of the drama, you've stopped reacting to every cue, you've become aware. And presence that doesn't need approval is terrifying to anyone still living in projection, because when you refuse to play the role, the fantasy collapses. And most people aren't ready for what's left after that, but some are. And those are the women who will be drawn to you, not because you triggered their wounds, but because you resonate with their wholeness. Not because you match a fantasy, but because you embody truth. And in that space, everything changes. You don't need to fight to be seen. You don't need to compete to be loved. You don't need to explain to be understood. The connection feels simple, not because it lacks depth, but because it doesn't require performance. You'll still feel fear. You'll still feel doubt. You'll still be human. But you won't collapse. You won't run. You won't hide behind strategies or personas or carefully crafted masks. You'll meet her as you are, whole, awake, present. Not every woman will be ready for that, but the right ones will feel it like a signal, a deep exhale in a world full of noise and pretending. This is the new standard. Not domination, not submission, but resonance rooted in reality. Masculine energy that isn't reactive or needy, but steady and embodied. Feminine energy that isn't manipulative or wounded, but expressive and clear. And the only way to reach this space is through the portal Jung spent his life mapping: individuation. The path to wholeness. The long, sometimes lonely, often painful journey of meeting every part of yourself. Not to fix it, but to own it. Because in the end, female desire is not a threat to your masculinity. It is the fire that reveals whether that masculinity is authentic. And male presence is not a tool to gain affection. It is the anchor that allows real love to be possible. This is the truth behind all the chaos, all the testing, all the confusion. It was never about being perfect. It was about being real. You can stop trying now. Stop performing. Stop proving. Just be. Be the man who sees through illusion. Be the man who no longer needs to be chosen because he has chosen himself. Be the man who doesn't run from the shadow, but lives alongside it. The man who understands that true power doesn't shout, it resonates. And in that resonance, you will attract what you were never able to chase. Not because you played the game better, but because you stopped playing it altogether. This is the new story. The quiet revolution of men who no longer ask for permission to exist, who stop negotiating with their worth, who face the feminine not with fear but with reverence, not to conquer but to meet, fully, honestly, and completely. This is not the end. It's the beginning.